They left humans to die and awakened Earth's long memory. Part 1. The Abandonment. The stars had always promised friendship. For 50 years, humanity had lived among the Galactic Concord, a coalition of 12 alien species who had traveled between stars for 10,000 years. Humans were the youngest members, still learning, still growing. The aliens called them the Children of Earth, and smiled with their strange faces when humans made mistakes. Han stood at the observation window of the orbital station, watching cargo ships move between Earth and the Moon. She was 32 years old, a captain with 10 years of service, and she had never felt afraid in space. The station was her home, her purpose, her life. 300 crew members worked under her command, keeping the station running, protecting the skies above Korea and half of Asia. Her communicator buzzed. "Captain, you need to come to the command center, now." The voice belonged to Park, her chief science officer and oldest friend. They had trained together, served together, and trusted each other with their lives, but she had never heard his voice shake like that before. When reached the command center, she found her crew staring at their screens in silence. Park stood at the main display, his face pale as paper. On the screen, she saw something that made no sense. The fold gates, the massive ring structures that allowed ships to travel between star systems in seconds, were activating, all of them, at once. "What is happening?" asked. Sara, the young communications specialist, turned to face her. The girl was only 23, brilliant with languages and codes, but right now she looked like a frightened child. "Captain, we are receiving transmissions from every conquered species. They are leaving." "Leaving? Leaving where?" "Everywhere. They are evacuating the entire region. Every colony, every station, every ship." Sora's hands trembled as she worked her console. "They are collapsing the fold gates behind them." Felt cold spread through her chest. The fold gates were the only way to travel faster than light. Without them, the nearest alien colony was 400 years away at best speed. Why? What are they running from? Park pointed at the edge of the display. At first saw nothing. Then she understood. The darkness between stars was moving. A wall of black shapes, each one larger than a mountain, stretched across the void. Thousands of them, millions. They blocked out entire constellations as they advanced. "The Conquered calls them the Swarm," said quietly. "They come from the space between galaxies. They have destroyed 17 civilizations in the last 10,000 years. The Conquered has been running from them for centuries. And now they run again." Understood, she wished she did not. "They are leaving us behind." A new transmission appeared on Sora's screen. The young woman's face crumbled as she read it. "Captain, this is from the Conquered High Council. It is addressed to all human receivers." "Play it." The message was simple. The voice was calm, almost kind, like a parent explaining death to a child. "Humanity is too young. Your foldgate technology is too primitive to evacuate your population in time. We cannot wait. Your sacrifice will be remembered. Your species will be honored in our histories. We are sorry." The transmission ended. Outside the window, watched the fold gates flash with brilliant light as ship after ship vanished. The aliens who had called themselves friends, who had shared technology and knowledge and promises of eternal partnership, fled like rats from a burning building. Within 2 hours, every gate had collapsed into dead metal. Earth was alone. Stood very still for a long moment. Her crew watched her, waiting, needing her to tell them what to do. She thought about her mother in, her brother in soul, the 8 billion people on the planet below who had just been sentenced to death by their so-called friends. "How long until they arrive?" she asked. Checked his calculations 3 times before answering. 14 days. 14 days. 2 weeks to prepare for a force that had destroyed 17 civilizations. 2 weeks to say goodbye to everyone and everything humanity had ever known. Turn to face her crew. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we are not running. Tell them we stand and fight. Captain Sora whispered, "We cannot win." "Probably not," smiled, and there was something fierce in it, something that had burned in human hearts since the first ancestor picked up a rock to fight a predator. "But we can make them remember us. If humanity dies, we die standing, we die fighting, and we make sure they never forget the cost of killing Earth." The crew straightened. Fear remained in their eyes, but something else appeared beside it. Pride. Defiance. The same stubborn refusal to surrender that had carried humanity through ice ages and plagues and wars and every disaster the universe had thrown at them. Far below, on Earth's surface, the same fire was spreading. Governments that had argued for decades came together in hours. Factories that had built consumer goods switched to weapons. Scientists who had studied theoretical physics began building anything that might hurt the enemy. 8 billion humans looked up at the approaching darkness and chose to fight. But deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in the trench where humans had never truly explored, something else was happening. Sensors across the planet detected an energy signature that should not exist. It was not human technology. It was not alien technology. It was something far, far older. Park stared at his readings, ran them again, and felt his understanding of the universe crack. "Captain, you need to see this." Joined him at his station. The readings made no sense. The energy source was massive, larger than anything humanity had ever built, and according to the data, it was older than the sun, older than the Earth itself. It had been sleeping beneath the ocean since before the first fish crawled onto land. "That is impossible," said. "Yes," his voice was barely a whisper, "but it is waking up." In the trench, 11 kilometers below the surface, the darkness began to glow. Ancient machines that had waited for 4 billion years stirred from their sleep. They had been placed there long ago, by beings who had walked between stars when the universe was young. They had seeded 1,000 worlds with potential, hoping that someday, somewhere, a species would rise worthy of their inheritance. Most of those worlds had failed. Life had died or evolved wrong or destroyed itself before reaching the stars. But Earth had survived. Humanity had survived. Against every odd, through every disaster, the stubborn children of a small blue world had refused to give up. And now, at the moment of their greatest danger, the long memory of Earth was finally awake. On the station, Sora detected a new signal rising from the planet below. It was not a human transmission. It was not in any language she knew, but somehow, impossibly, she understood it. The signal was a question, asked in feelings rather than words. It asked, "Are you ready to remember what you truly are?" And across the Earth, in the hearts of 8 billion humans preparing to fight and die against impossible odds, something ancient stirred in response. Something that had always been there, sleeping in human blood and bone and spirit. The long memory was calling its children home. They left humans to die and awakened Earth's long memory. Part 2. The Long Memory Awakens. Minyu had spent 15 years as a submarine pilot. He had seen strange things in the deep ocean, creatures that looked like nightmares, pressures that could crush steel like paper. But nothing had prepared him for this. His submarine hung in the water 3 kilometers above the trench floor, and below him the darkness was coming alive. Massive shapes were rising from the mud and rock, structures of perfect geometry that glowed with soft blue light. They were not natural. They were not human. They were beautiful in a way that hurt his eyes and made his heart beat faster. "Control, are you seeing this?" Minyu spoke into his radio, but only static answered. Every communication system had failed the moment the structures began to rise. He was alone, watching something impossible unfold. The structures kept coming. Towers and spheres and shapes that had no name in any human language. They rose slowly, gracefully, shedding 4 billion years of sediment like old skin. The water around them should have boiled from the energy they released, but instead it remained perfectly calm, as if the laws of physics had decided to wait politely. Then Minyu saw the gate. It was a ring, perhaps 2 kilometers across, made of metal that shifted colors like oil on water. It hung in the water ahead of him, and through its center he could see stars. Not the darkness of the deep ocean. Stars. An opening into space itself, here at the bottom of the sea. And through the gate, ships were coming. They were not like human ships. They were not like alien ships. They were something else entirely, vast and organic and mechanical all at once. Each one was larger than any vessel Minu had ever seen, and they moved with a grace that made human technology look like children's toys. Dozens of them. Hundreds. A fleet that had waited in some other place, some other dimension, for this exact moment. Far above, on the surface of the Pacific Ocean, Lee stood on the deck of a research vessel and watched the sea begin to glow. She was 45 years old, an archaeologist who had spent her entire career studying anomalies, ancient structures that appeared in every human civilization, symbols that repeated across cultures that should never have met, stories of beings who came from the sky and promised to return. She had always believed those stories were myths. Now she understood they were memories. The pyramids, she whispered to herself. Stonehenge, the lines. We did not build them to honor gods. We built them to remember, to keep the knowledge alive until we were ready. Her tablet flickered and text appeared on the screen, not in any modern language but in the strange symbols she had found carved in stone on 6 continents. This time, she could read them. The meaning flowed into her mind like water into a cup. Children of Earth, we have WAITED. You have survived, now you will remember. Across the planet, 8 billion humans felt it. Not everyone understood what was happening. Not everyone could process the flood of ancient knowledge that touched their minds, but everyone felt something. A connection, a recognition, the sense that humanity had never truly been alone. In Seoul, an old man named sat in his study, surrounded by books about history and myth. He had spent 60 years trying to prove that human civilization was older than science believed, that there was a missing piece in humanity's story. Now that piece was found, and tears ran down his wrinkled face as understanding filled him. The beings who had built the long memory were called the architects. They had existed when the universe was young, when the first stars were still being born. They had traveled between galaxies for billions of years, seeding worlds with the potential for intelligent life. They were not gods, but they were close. And they were gone, vanished into some mystery that even their vast technology could not solve. But before they left, they had hidden pieces of themselves throughout the cosmos. Memory banks, technology caches, gifts for any species that survived long enough to find them. The long memory was one such gift, buried on Earth before the planet had finished cooling from its formation. It had waited, it had watched, it had recorded every moment of human evolution, from the first single-celled organism to the first human who looked up at the stars and wondered, and it had judged. Most species failed. They destroyed themselves or they evolved in directions that made them incompatible with the inheritance. But humans had passed every test, not because they were peaceful or wise or perfect. They passed because they refused to die, because every time the universe tried to destroy them, they fought back. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, plagues, wars. Humans survived them all through sheer stubborn determination. That stubbornness was what the architects had been waiting for. Not intelligence alone, not technology alone, but the will to never surrender, combined with a creativity that could adapt to any challenge. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not but they were the most determined, and that made them perfect inheritors. Park stood in the command center of the station, watching data streams that rewrote everything humanity knew about itself. The long memory was not just offering technology. It was offering transformation. A chance to unlock potential that had been sleeping in human DNA since the beginning. We were seeded, he said to Captain. Millions of years ago, the architects modified the first humans, not to control us, not to make us slaves, to give us the capacity to use their technology if we ever needed it. We have always had this potential. We just needed the key to unlock it. Studied the data, ships, weapons, shields, technology that made the Galactic Conquered look primitive. All of it was now available to humanity along with the knowledge to use it, but there was a price. It says we have to choose, she said. Accept the inheritance and become the new guardians of this galaxy. Fight not just for ourselves but for everyone that would destroy, or refuse, and the long memory will sleep again forever. That is not much of a choice. No, smiled grimly, but it is the only one we have. In the trench, Minu watched as the first humans began to approach the ancient ships. Scientists and soldiers, chosen through some process he did not understand, were being transported down from the surface. They touched the vessels and the vessels responded. They bonded. They became something new. Among them was a young pilot named. She had lost her squadron in the first attack, watched her friends die in the cold darkness between planets. She had come to the long memory not for power, but for revenge. When she touched the ship, she expected pain. Instead, she felt recognition. The vessel knew her. It had been waiting for her, specifically for her, for 4 billion years. Her mind expanded to fill it, and suddenly she could feel everything. The water around her, the earth beneath her, the stars above her, and far away, approaching with terrible patience, the swarm. They built these for us, she said, her voice echoing through the water and across the long memories network. They were always meant for us. The ship responded to her thought, rising from the ocean floor, shedding water and sediment, and emerging into the sky for the first time in 4 billion years. Other ships followed, a fleet of ancient guardians, now piloted by human hearts and minds. On the station, Captain Han made her decision. She opened a channel to every human receiver on Earth. This is Captain Han of the orbital station. You have all felt it. You all know what we have discovered. The Galactic Conquered abandoned us to die, but we will not die. The long memory has given us a chance, and we will take it, not just to survive, not just to fight, but to become what we were always meant to be, guardians, protectors, the children of Earth finally grown up. She paused, looking at the data on her screen. 14 days until they arrived. 14 days to learn technology that had taken the architects billions of years to develop. It should have been impossible. But humans had always been good at impossible things. Let them come, said. Let them see what happens when you leave humans to die. And far below, the long memory hummed with something that might have been approval. After 4 billion years of waiting, its children had finally come home. They left humans to die and awakened Earth's long memory. Part 3. The Inheritance. The bonding process was not gentle. It was not meant to be. The architects had designed it to be fast, intense, and permanent. They knew that when their children finally needed the inheritance, they would need it desperately. Han sat in the center of a chamber that had risen from the ocean floor, surrounded by light that seemed to flow like water. The long memory was inside her now, pouring knowledge into her mind at a rate that should have killed her. She saw the birth of stars. She saw the rise of the first architects, beings of pure thought who learned to shape matter with their will. She saw them travel between galaxies, seeding life on billions of worlds. And she saw them vanish, one by one, into a mystery that even they could not understand. But she also saw Earth, 4 billion years of history compressed into moments of perfect clarity, the first cells dividing in warm oceans, the first fish crawling onto land, the dinosaurs rising and falling, and then the humans, small, weak, fragile creatures who should have died 1,000 times over, but they never did. They adapted, they learned, they survived. The long memory showed her why. The architects had seen potential in early primates, something special in the way their brains worked. Not intelligence alone, many species had that. Something else. A spark of creativity combined with absolute stubbornness. The ability to imagine the impossible and then make it real through sheer determination. So they had modified the early humans. Not much, just enough. A few genetic changes that would only activate under the right conditions. A connection to the long memory that would remain dormant until humanity was ready. And then they had left, trusting that their children would either grow strong enough to claim their inheritance or die trying. Opened her eyes. The process was complete. She was still herself, still human, but now she understood things she could never have imagined before. The technology around her made sense now. The ships, the weapons, the shields that could stop a sun, all of it was hers to command. Around her, other humans were going through the same process. Thousands of them, chosen by the long memory through criteria that no one fully understood. Park was there, his scientific mind drinking in knowledge like water. Sara was there, her gift for languages now expanded to include forms of communication that did not use sound or light. And was there, her connection to her sentinel ship deepening until she could no longer tell where she ended and it began. In his study in Seoul, had finished processing what the long memory had shown him. The old historian sat back in his chair, staring at notes that now seemed childish and incomplete. Everything humanity thought it knew about history was wrong, or rather, incomplete. There was a layer beneath the layer they had seen, a foundation that explained all the anomalies he had spent his life studying. But he had also seen something else, something that made his old heart cold with fear. He activated his communication link to the station. "Captain, I need to speak with you. It is urgent." When appeared on his screen, she looked different, stronger somehow, more certain. But her eyes were still human, still kind. That gave hope. "What is it, Professor?" The took a deep breath. "I know what they truly are. The long memory showed me. They are not invaders, they are not conquerors, they are erasers." His expression did not change. "Explain." "There is something else out there. Something beyond even what the architects could understand. A force that fears what young species might become. They are its tools, sent to eliminate any civilization that develops too much potential. The Galactic Conquered knew this. They have known for 10,000 years. Then why did they not fight? Because they believed it was impossible. They cannot be destroyed, only delayed. Every species that has tried to fight them has been wiped out. The conquered chose to run, to preserve what they could, to buy time. They left us behind because they thought we were already dead. A sacrifice to slow the down." Was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was cold and hard. "They were wrong." "Perhaps," leaned forward. "But Captain, you must understand what we are attempting. No species has ever defeated no species has ever inherited the architect's full legacy. We are not just fighting for survival. We are trying to do something that has never been done in the history of the universe." "Good," smiled, and there was something fierce in it, something ancient and new at the same time. Humans have always been good at doing impossible things. In orbit around Earth, the transformation was accelerating. Shipyards that had taken the architects to build were now rising from the ocean, from the deserts, from the mountains. Human workers, their minds enhanced by the long memory, assembled weapons and ships at speeds that should have been impossible. The technology was alien, but human creativity was adapting it, improving it, making it their own. Flew her sentinel ship through the upper atmosphere, testing its capabilities. The vessel responded to her thoughts faster than her old fighter ever had. When she wanted to turn, it turned. When she wanted to fire, it fired. But there was more to it than that. The ship was learning from her. Her instincts, her creativity, her unpredictable human nature were being absorbed into its ancient systems. It was becoming something new, something that had never existed before. "The architects could never use these ships the way we can," she said through the long memory network. "They were too logical, too predictable. Their minds followed patterns that they learned to counter, but human minds are different. We are chaos. We are creativity. We are everything they cannot anticipate." Down on Earth's surface, military forces were being reorganized. Nam, a ground commander with 20 years of experience, was training his soldiers to use weapons that made their old guns look like toys. The energy rifles could punch holes through mountains. The armor could shrug off explosions that would have destroyed tanks. And the soldiers themselves were faster, stronger, more aware, as the long memories modifications spread through their bodies. But knew that technology alone would not win this war. He had studied the records of civilizations that had tried to fight They had all had superior technology. They had all lost, because they did not fight like normal enemies. They did not care about casualties. They did not retreat. They simply kept coming, wave after wave, until their enemies were exhausted and broken. "We need something they have never seen before," he told his officers. "Not just better weapons, a better way of fighting, something human." Shin, a tactical genius who had coordinated military operations across 3 continents, was already working on exactly that. She had absorbed more strategic data from the long memory than anyone else, and she was using it to develop tactics that combined ancient alien wisdom with human unpredictability. "The architects fought with perfect efficiency," she explained to the command council. "Every move calculated, every outcome predicted, but efficiency is a pattern and the learn to counter patterns. Humans are different. We make mistakes. We improvise. We do stupid, illogical things that sometimes turn out to be brilliant. They have never faced that before." Captain listened to all of this and felt something strange growing in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. Hope. Real, genuine hope. Not the desperate hope of a condemned person, but the confident hope of someone who has found a chance. "How long until we are ready?" she asked. Park checked his calculations. "They will arrive in 11 days. We will have a functional fleet in 10. It will be close." It always is. Stood and looked at the display showing Earth below, her home, her people. 8 billion humans who had been abandoned by the galaxy and had chosen to fight anyway. Send a message to everyone. Tell them what we are building. Tell them what we are becoming. And tell them that when they arrive, they will face something they have never encountered before. She paused, her enhanced eyes seeing details on the planet's surface that she could never have noticed before. Factories working day and night. Ships rising from the oceans. Soldiers training with weapons from beyond time. A species that had been left to die was becoming something new. Tell them the children of Earth are coming home. And across the planet, in the hearts and minds of 8 billion humans, the long memory stirred. 4 billion years of waiting were almost over. The inheritance was almost complete. They were coming, and for the first time in 10,000 years, something was waiting to meet them. They left humans to die and awakened Earth's long memory. Part 4: The Battle for Sol. They came like a wall of darkness eating the stars. The swarm entered the solar system on the 14th day, exactly as Park had calculated. There were millions of them, each ship a black shape that absorbed light and radiated cold. They moved in perfect formation, a pattern they had used to destroy 17 civilizations. They expected the same outcome here. They were wrong. Captain Hand stood on the bridge of the transformed station. It was no longer just an orbital platform. The long memory had rebuilt it into a fortress, bristling with weapons that drew power from the sun itself. Around her, 300 crew members worked in perfect coordination, their minds linked through the ancient network, their human creativity enhanced by alien technology. "All ships report status," commanded. The responses came instantly, flowing through her mind rather than through speakers. 3,000 sentinel ships, each one piloted by a human whose consciousness had merged with ancient machinery. 50 battle platforms, risen from the ocean floors where they had slept for billions of years. And on Earth's surface, 12 million soldiers ready to defend every inch of ground. His voice was clear and steady. "Strike fleet ready, Captain. We are positioned behind Mars, waiting for your signal." "Defense grid online," reported Shin from her tactical command center. "I have calculated 17,000 possible attack patterns. though we'll use none of them." "Why not?" asked Park. "Because we have never lost to them before. They have no data on how to fight us. For the first time in 10,000 years, they are flying blind." The swarm continued its approach, slowing as it detected something unexpected: resistance, technology that should not exist, a species that should have been dead. Smiled grimly. "Let us give them something to think about." Long Memory Network broadcast our message. The transmission went out across every frequency, in every language they might understand. It was simple, just 7 words. "Welcome to Earth, now you learn fear." The response was immediate. The swarm broke formation, millions of ships spreading out to surround the solar system. They were adapting already, trying to find patterns in humanity's defenses. That was their strength. They learned, they evolved, they countered. But humans could learn too. "First wave incoming," announced. 300,000 ships targeting the outer defense line. "Let them come." His voice was calm. "Do not engage until they reach the marker." The ships accelerated, expecting easy prey. They had done this countless times before. Break the outer defenses, overwhelm with numbers, push toward the planet. The pattern was ancient and effective. They reached the marker. Now said. The first surprise was the mines. Not physical explosives, but pockets of compressed space-time that the long memory had seeded throughout the system. Thousands of ships simply ceased to exist, crushed into points smaller than atoms. The swarm adjusted, spreading thinner, but that only made them vulnerable to the second surprise. And her strike fleet emerged from behind Mars at impossible speed. The Sentinel ships tore through the scattered formation like wolves through sheep. Energy weapons that burned hotter than stars cut black ships in half. Human pilots, their instincts and creativity merged with ancient technology, flew patterns that no computer could predict. "They are trying to adapt," reported, her mind processing data faster than any computer. "Their formation is shifting." "Show them something new," ordered. The human fleet scattered, each pilot improvising their own attack pattern. Some flew in spirals. Some stopped dead and let the pass before opening fire from behind. One pilot, a young woman actually turned her ship upside down relative to the enemy because she thought it might confuse them. It did. They had never faced chaos before. They had fought logical enemies, efficient enemies, predictable enemies. They had learned to counter every organized strategy. But humans did not fight with strategy alone. They fought with creativity, with stubbornness, with a refusal to accept defeat that bordered on madness. For the first time in 10,000 years, the swarm hesitated. "They are pulling back," said, disbelief in his voice. "They are actually retreating." "Not retreating," studied the tactical display with enhanced eyes. "Regrouping, learning, they will adapt to our chaos. We need to change again before they figure us out." On Earth's surface, the second phase of the battle was beginning. Landing ships had broken through the orbital defenses, dropping troops across every continent. They were ground forces unlike anything humanity had seen before, creatures of black chitin and cold intelligence that could survive in any environment. Nam led the defense of Seoul. His soldiers, enhanced by the long memory but still fundamentally human, held positions across the city. They came in waves, millions of them, crawling over buildings and through streets. "Hold the line," shouted, his enhanced voice carrying across the battlefield. "Make them pay for every meter." The fighting was brutal. Human weapons cut down by the thousands, but more kept coming. That was their way: overwhelm, exhaust, consume. They did not care about casualties because they had no individuals to lose. The swarm was one mind, one purpose, and it could afford to spend lives endlessly. But the humans had something they did not expect. They had each other. When one soldier fell, another took their place. When one position was overrun, the defenders fell back to the next line instead of breaking. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their families, their cities, their world. Every human on that battlefield knew exactly what they were protecting. A young soldier named, barely 19 years old, held a bridge crossing alone for 17 minutes while her squad evacuated wounded civilians. She killed 300 before her weapon overheated. When it failed, she picked up a piece of debris and kept fighting. She died still swinging. Her sacrifice was not wasted. The civilians reached safety. Her squad returned with reinforcements. And across the long memory network, every human felt her courage and answered it with their own. They are targeting the broadcast stations, Shin reported from orbit. They have realized we are using the long memory to coordinate. If they destroy the stations, our network fails. Captain made her decision instantly. All available forces to broadcast station defense. We cannot lose that network. Park had another idea. Captain, what if we use the network offensively? The long memory can broadcast more than coordination signals. It can broadcast memory, experience, understanding. What are you suggesting? Show them what they are fighting. Show them humanity's memory, every war we survived, every disaster we endured, every time we refused to die when we should have. Let them see what they have awakened. It was a risk. The broadcast would require massive energy, leaving defenses weakened for critical seconds, but understood something that did not. Humans had never won wars through superior firepower alone. They won through will, through spirit, through the ability to keep fighting when logic said they should surrender. Do it, she ordered. The long memory pulsed. Across the solar system, into the collective consciousness, poured 4 billion years of human memory. Ice ages survived. Asteroids endured. Plagues that killed millions but never everyone. Wars that destroyed cities but never hope. A species that had been knocked down 1,000 times and had risen every single time. The swarm felt something it had never felt before. Not fear exactly. They were beyond fear, but something close. Recognition. Understanding that this prey was different, that these creatures would not stop fighting until every single one was dead, and even then their children would keep fighting. For a moment, just a moment, the swarm paused. It was enough. Let her strike fleet into the gap, driving straight for the center of the swarm. Follow me, she shouted across the network. Show them what happens when you leave humans to die. The human fleet surged forward. On the ground, soldiers pushed back against the waves. In orbit, the station unleashed weapons that turned space itself into fire. And everywhere, in every heart and mind, the long memory sang with human defiance. The battle for Saul had truly begun. And for the first time in 10,000 years, they were not certain they would win. They left humans to die and awakened Earth's long memory. Part 5: The New Guardians. The battle had raged for 7 days. 7 days of constant fighting, of ships destroyed and rebuilt, of soldiers falling and others taking their place. 7 days of humanity refusing to die. And somewhere in the chaos, something had changed. The swarm was not retreating. It was not advancing. For the first time in its ancient existence, it was waiting, calculating, trying to understand an enemy that should have been consumed days ago. On the station, Captain Hand studied the tactical display with exhausted eyes. Humanity had lost half its fleet. 3 million soldiers had died defending Earth's surface. Cities lay in ruins. The cost was terrible. But they were still fighting, and they were no longer attacking. They are confused, Park said quietly. Our casualties should have broken us by now. Every other species gave up when losses reached this level, but we keep fighting. Because we have no choice, replied. Because we never had another option. His voice came through the network, tired but determined. Captain, I have an idea. It is crazy. It might not work, but if it does, we can end this today. Tell me. They are a hive mind. One consciousness controlling millions of bodies. The records from the long memory show that no one has ever attacked that consciousness directly. They have always fought the bodies, the ships, the ground forces. But what if we could reach the mind itself? Shin spoke up from her tactical center. The hive mind is distributed across the entire swarm. There is no central point to attack. Not physically, his voice was intense, but through the long memory. The network the architects built can transmit more than data. It can transmit experience, emotion, memory. What if we could force our way into the consciousness and show them something they have never seen before? Show them what? Us, everything we are. Not our weapons or our ships, our will, our refusal to surrender, our humanity. Park worked the calculations rapidly. It might work. The long memory has already demonstrated it can interface with alien consciousnesses, but to force a connection with someone would have to get close, very close, inside their formation. I will do it, his voice was steady. My Sentinel ship is the most advanced in the fleet. I have the strongest connection to the long memory. I can reach them. Closed her eyes. She knew what was asking. The pilot would have to fly alone into the heart of the swarm, surrounded by millions of enemies. Even with the best ship humanity had, her chances of survival were almost zero. She said quietly, "This is likely a one-way mission." "I know." There was no fear in the young pilot's voice, only purpose. "Captain, I have lost my friends, my squadron. I have seen what they do to worlds they consume. If there is a chance to stop them, even a small one, I have to take it." The command channel was silent for a long moment. Then voices began to speak. Pilots volunteering to escort, ground commanders offering covering fire, scientists suggesting modifications that might increase her chances, every human in the network reaching out to support her. Felt tears on her cheeks. This was humanity, not the technology or the weapons or the ancient inheritance. The people, the connection, the willingness to sacrifice everything for each other. "Go," she said, "and take all of us with you." Launched her Sentinel ship from the fleet's defensive line. 100 pilots flew with her, forming a wedge that drove toward the heart of the swarm. They responded instantly, millions of ships converging on the small formation. The escort pilots fell one by one, their final thoughts joining the long memory network. Each death was felt across Earth, a pulse of grief and gratitude that strengthened the connection. By the time reached the swarm's center, she was alone. But she was not really alone. Through the long memory, 8 billion humans were with her. Their memories, their emotions, their unbreakable will flowed through her consciousness. She was no longer just. She was humanity itself. Her Sentinel ship opened a connection to the hive mind. The contact was violent, two consciousnesses colliding like galaxies. They tried to absorb her, to consume her mind the way they consumed worlds, but did not resist. She welcomed the connection, and through it she poured everything humanity had ever been. They felt pain and loss and grief. They felt the terror of children hiding during wars, the despair of parents burying their young. They felt the crushing weight of extinctions nearly complete, of populations reduced to thousands, of hope nearly extinguished. But they also felt what came after. They felt the stubborn refusal to surrender, the hands that rebuilt ruined cities, the voices that sang songs in the darkness, the love that persisted through every horror. They felt humanity's terrible, beautiful, unbreakable will to live. For 10,000 years, they had consumed species that gave up when faced with impossible odds. They had never encountered a species that grew stronger under pressure, that turned suffering into determination, that refused to die simply because death was logical. The hive mind could not process it. This prey was supposed to be weak. These creatures were supposed to break. Why did they keep fighting? Why did they not surrender? Why did they welcome death if it meant protecting others? They felt something fracture inside their collective consciousness, not defeat, something worse, doubt. And then showed them the final memory, A vision of the future, humanity rising, the long memory fully awakened. Human ships spreading across the galaxy not to conquer but to protect, to do what the galactic conquered had been too afraid to do, to stand against the darkness and say, no further. This is what you have awakened, his voice echoed through the connection. Not victims, not prey, guardians, and we will never ever stop. The swarm broke. Not all at once, not completely, but across the solar system, millions of ships began to scatter. The hive mind, shattered by doubt and something that might have been the beginning of fear, could no longer maintain perfect coordination. For the first time in their ancient existence, the retreated. Sentinel ship drifted in the void, its systems burned out from the psychic effort. But she was alive. Barely. A rescue team found her floating in her damaged vessel, unconscious but breathing. In the months that followed, humanity began to rebuild. They had fled to the outer edges of the solar system, still present but no longer attacking. They were watching, waiting, perhaps learning. And something else was happening. Across the galaxy, in the places where the galactic conquered had hidden, signals were being received. News of humanity's stand had spread through the long memory network. Species that had given up hope were looking toward Earth with something new in their hearts. One by one, conquered ships began to return, not to save humanity but to join them. A year after the battle, Captain Hand stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly. Representatives from 40 species filled the chamber, some who had abandoned humanity, and some who had only just learned of Earth's existence. All of them were looking at her with expressions she could barely read but understood perfectly. Respect, wonder, hope. You left us to die, said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. You abandoned us because you believed resistance was impossible, because you had run for so long that you forgot how to fight. The chamber was silent. And we thank you for it. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd. Because when you abandoned us, you forced us to become what we were always meant to be. Not victims, not sacrifices, not the children you remembered. We grew up, we found our inheritance, and we discovered something the architects always knew. She paused, looking at the gathered species, at the cameras broadcasting her words across the galaxy, at the stars beyond the chamber's windows. Humanity was never meant to be protected. We were meant to be the protectors, the guardians, the ones who stand when everyone else runs. The architects chose Earth because they saw in us something precious, not strength, not intelligence, something better, the refusal to surrender, the will to keep fighting when all hope is lost, the stubborn, impossible, beautiful determination to survive. She smiled, and in that smile was all the grief and pride and hope of a species that had been abandoned and had risen anyway. The long memory is awake now, not just on Earth but everywhere humanity goes. We will rebuild the fold gates, we will reclaim the colonies, and when they return, because they will return, they will find something waiting for them, not victims, guardians. The chamber erupted in something that might have been cheers, stepped back from the podium and found Park waiting for her. That was a good speech, he said quietly. It was the truth. On the observation deck of the chamber stood alone, looking out at the stars. Her sentinel ship had been rebuilt, stronger than before. Somewhere out there, the waited. Somewhere further, other threats lurked in the darkness between galaxies. And somewhere beyond even that, the mystery that had consumed the architects awaited its own discovery. But for now, in this moment, humanity was at peace. Not the peace of the defeated or the exhausted, the peace of the strong, the peace of those who have faced the worst and emerged unbroken. She thought of her lost squadron, of holding the bridge, of every human who had died so that others could live. They were part of the long memory now. Their sacrifices would never be forgotten. We will be ready, she whispered to the stars. Whatever comes next, we will be ready. And across the galaxy, in the hearts and minds of humans and aliens alike, the long memory hummed with ancient approval. Its children had finally come home. Earth remembered, and Earth would never forget.